He originally was going to be Filipino. Um, what happened was that in the middle of 281, I was asked to create a new character. And I was given basically a blank page, say, basta make him badass. And so I created a character. 2 weeks later, I pitched it on the phone to New York, to the editor, and he said, go. And so my next thing right after he greenlighted it would be to say, oh, by the way, he's going to be Filipino. Before I could open my mouth, he said that, oh, Whilce, can your character be black? Because the black readership, they've been asking for a superhero. And, me being Filipino and gracious, I said no problem because there's always time. So he was going to be Filipino.
What is good, guys? M.V.K here, back again. Welcome back to another episode of the Opinion Spot, guys. And guys, you just heard or saw basically something that I never knew about. That's why it's always good to keep your mind open, and always as well, even in our community, the geek community, we don't know everything. And to hear something like that makes it even worthwhile for me, because I am a connoisseur of absorbing knowledge of our community, the geek community, the comic community, you name it. Today, as you heard, guys, today is very interesting because I'm going to talk about what Mr. Portacio, I hope I'm saying his name right, Whilce Portacio basically said in that interview, which is very interesting. Now, as you heard what he said, in the beginning, if everything went right, everything went his way, Lucas Bishop, aka Bishop from the X-Men, would have been Filipino instead of black. I love hearing stuff like that. I love hearing stuff like that because it reminds me of my time when I attended New York Comic Con 2019, and I got to meet and talk a little bit with Erik Larsen, the creator of Savage Dragon. And Mr. Larsen actually told me a story of the dragon himself. I asked him, I said, Mr. Larsen, how did you come up with the character of Savage Dragon? And he explained it to me. He basically said, in the beginning, he wasn't going to be the mountain of green muscle humanoid dragon alien man that you see now. He was just going to be a guy in a costume similar to that of Batman. And I'm like, wow, you learn something every day, right? And that was that was 6 years ago when he told me that. So to hear that's even more cooler to me. And I'll explain why. So let's think about it for a second. Bishop came out, debuted in comics in Uncanny X-Men number 282, I believe. That was his debut. We all know Bishop's backstory to a degree. If you don't, research this, but I'll give you a little crash course. Bishop grew up in a time where mutants were not in a good light. He grew up 80 years in a possible Marvel future, but when we talk about the future of Marvel, nothing is always precise because things could strew off the tangent and go. Yeah, you can tell I'm a big Back to the Future fan. So yeah, his future may be different from another future, but in there, he grew up in basically a concentration camp, and that M on his eye, that tattoo represents him basically being branded because what he's a mutant. Then of course there was a rebellion. He escaped with his sister, and then fast forward years later, we all know what happened to Bishop. He comes to the future to protect Professor Xavier, all that. But things could have been different. Things could have been different. Things could have been probably a little different. Because instead of a black man with that M tattoo, Bishop would have probably been a Filipino man with that tattoo. That's really cool. I have a lot of Filipino friends, and first and foremost, I love the Filipino culture. I love the Filipino people. They're just very treasured. They're very loving people, and every time I see my friends, whether I'm working or they see me, they always come over, and especially because I work with a few of them, so they'll come over and ask me like, how's your dad doing, or how's your brother doing, and things like that. So I love that. But to hear that Bishop was going to be Filipino is interesting, because now you're going through now in a sense you're taking a different culture but incorporating it. Now if you look at Bishop through a lot of different artist renditions of him, there are times Bishop is, well, in most cases Bishop is either drawn colored darker, or he's very light skinned, or he has that complexion of someone from a southwestern island, in a sense, South Asian island, Eastern island, and I've always wondered about that. And there have been times where I've looked at artists' renditions of Bishop, and I'm like, he kind of looks mixed, or he always gave me that impression that Bishop was mixed before even knowing that he was fully black. But to hear Mr. Portacio, basically, if I'm butchering his name, I apologize. To hear him basically say that everything was a go. The people in New York, the heads at Marvel in New York said, go for it. And he just forgot to say, by the way, this character is going to be Filipino. And they basically told him, well, look, the black community wants a new representation in the superhero, and he was fine with it. And I'm sure, it kind of, he says it didn't bother him, as you heard, but I'm sure there's a little bit that's like, I kind of wanted it to be that, because I can understand that too, where sometimes you have a character you wanted to create, and then they're like, well, can you change the character? I had that done before, a long time ago, and this is going back to my high school days. I was in English, and our teacher basically asked us to do a creative writing story, and my team was supposed to write an adventure story of 4 adventurers, and myself, another guy, and 2 other people were going to create the main cast. And for me, one of the cast members was, I basically said, okay, I know what I want my cast member to be. I know what I want my character to be. And I described it to them. I said, basically, he's going to be biracial. He's going to be a mixture between being half indigenous and half black. And the other characters were basically fully white. And over time, it looked like everything was going well, right? And then, of course, all of a sudden, one of the guys came to me and said, hey, Chris, can we talk to you about the creative writing project? And I said, yeah, what's going on? And he's like, hey, listen, could you maybe change his ethnicity? Maybe he can, instead. And I'm like, why? And he's like, well, it just feels weird, This is at a time when a little ignorance is still kind of blissful back then. And he's like, well, look, we have 3 characters, and it just feels weird that one of them is, being that fact that they're supposed to be like childhood friends, and it just feels weird that one of them is biracial. And I said to the guy, his name was Lamont, and but he was white. And I said, Lamont, I said, okay, so you want me to make him white just so it fits in better? Is that what you're saying? Yeah. You know, I'm sorry. Oh, but and then the other friend, Alex comes up and he says, well, how about this? You could. What if you still make him biracial, but he's still half native, but his other half is white? And I said, no, that's not what I'm gonna do. No, I had the whole story picked out of who this guy was, and I told him I'm not changing it for just a silly reason of because you want all four characters to be white. I said no, I'm not changing it. He's gonna be Afro-Indigenous. His mother's native. I never said what tribe she was from, and I said, and his father's black, and I said that's how it's gonna be. And they told the teacher, and pretty much the teacher told me, she called me up, my English teacher. She called me up and she says, the boys tell me you're having a problem with the creative process. I said, yeah. I said, yeah, they want me to change my character just so it could fit in better with them. And I told them I'm not doing it. I said, I'm not doing it. So, I'm not doing it. And then basically she says to me, my English teacher, well, this was I think it was my 10th grade English teacher. She says, okay. She said, she says, how about you create a character for them? And she says, you create a character for them, and for extra credit, I'll give you extra credit if you continue to do a story with that character you created. And I smiled and I said, deal. So I went back and I told them, I just said, okay. I said, I'll change it. I'll make a new character up. So basically I made up a very loud, courageous, but brutish character that was white, and off to the side, and I went off and I went home and started creating a creative story with that same character that I wanted to do, and I got the extra credit, and when we got our grades back, we only got, in terms of the creative writing, we were graded on each of our writing, and the character I created for them only gave me like an 85, but my teacher loved the story that I wanted to write, and that boosted my grade up to basically an A+. And they looked at me and was like, they looked at it and they said to the teacher, they was like, Miss Everson, how come Chris got and we only got 85? And she said, well, I compromised with him. She said, I compromised with him for the better. I told him to create another character for y'all group project, but I gave him, because I wanted to see if he was going to be able to still create, and I did. And I looked at them like, almost like, yeah, see? I said, I wasn't trying to be smug about it, but I was just like, yeah, see? So, having said that, Mr. Whilce could have done the same thing with Bishop, in a sense, and could have just said, called the heads back at Marvel and said, yo, no, he's going to be Filipino. I'll just create a new black character for them, so we'll all be in peace. He could have did that. Because think about it. What would have happened if Bishop stayed what he truly was going to be, Filipino? What would have happened? One of the things I think would have happened is Bishop would have been celebrated as in the Asian community, probably more abroad. He would have been a part of when we celebrate in May, when we celebrate Asian American and South Pacific Islander Heritage Month. He would have been a part of that month as well. I can't really say how much of his character would changed. You know, Bishop has always been about the law in a sense, and order, and you know, not that much would have changed in my opinion. He probably still would. More importantly, he still would have been a time traveler. He still would have been probably trying to protect Professor Xavier at the time. I'm looking at it from a point of view. He still probably would have been rocking around with, you know, with Bishop at times. He probably would have been. He still probably would have been chasing Bishop. Excuse me. He probably still would have been chasing. He probably still would have been chasing Bishop Cable when he had Hope, because Bishop was like the main villain in that, and you're like, whoa. Would he have still joined up with Tony Stark during Civil War? Remember that? Y'all remember that? Yeah, Bishop joined up with them during Civil War. He and it was, I hated how they did it too. It was really sneaky when Tony and them were leaving the X Mansion at the time. Bishop came out of the bushes and was like, "Hey Stark, we need to talk." Y'all don't. If y'all never read that, is the Civil War X-Men miniseries. It was basically the spin-offs, and it was just weird. But at the same time, I would have been cool with it. I would have been so cool with seeing Bishop drawn and portrayed now, instead of being a part of the black community, now he's a part of the Asian community. I would have been fine with that, because I have so many favorite Asian-born, Asian American characters in comics. My love for Bishop would have never changed. I could tell you that right now. It would have never changed. But I'm sure there probably would have been some change and maybe some compromises. And if he had went with it, I'm sure that imagine if without approval, there probably would have been some consequences of it. But it's still just very cool to hear when you hear that not everything was set and planned for characters. Like, this character is supposed to be like this, or this is what it originally it was going to be this, and originally she was going to be this, or he was going to be this, and this, blah. We originally was going to make him younger and things like. I love hearing stuff like that. I love hearing things like that, because that is so cool to me. And to hear that Lucas Bishop, and makes you wonder, would his name have still been Lucas? I'm sure his name would have still been Bishop, but would his name have still been Lucas? I still think he probably would have still held that name. So him, his sister Shard, they all would have been Filipino, and I would have been cool with that. So I love hearing stuff like that, guys. It really just shows that nothing is always set in stone, and you have to really be really cool about it. And as you saw, you heard Mr. Wilson said he was very gracious about it. You know, the Filipino in him was like, okay, I'll compliment, no problem, I'll do it. And still we got Bishop today, and Bishop is still around to this day. He's gone through many changes over his debut from 1991 or 90. You know, John Byrne and Mr. Portacio basically created him. But yeah, he's gone through a lot of shit. I mean, he's had the long silky hair. He's had short hair. He's had a Caesar. You know, Bishop's had a Caesar. He's been bald. He was one of my favorite. If you would ask me what was one of your favorite moments in time for Bishop, I'll tell you. One of my favorite moments for Bishop is during is during a series, his own series. He had his own series, and it was called District X. And basically, Bishop was doing what he was when he back in his time. He was a cop. He was like a detective. He was kind of like Shaft in a sense. It was so cool. At a time when you guys, if y'all know the Marvel Universe, at one point in time, New York City, Marvel's New York City, there was a section in Manhattan that was called District X, because everybody in that section was mutants. Bishop was the designated cop of that, and he had I'm thinking he was a human partner. I have that whole run. It was so cool. I loved it so much, and it ended. But it was really cool to see Bishop being a cop. You know, he was wearing a big black trench coat. Like I said, he looked like Shaft. You know, he looked like Shaft. Look, he definitely looked like Shaft, and I loved it. And I think it's very hard to find in trade. So if you have it, keep it, because it was so fun. That's one of my favorite times for Bishop. I love that. Don't get me wrong. I loved them during Extreme X-Men. That was great too. You know, all that stuff. But when for his own, when he was definitely my most hated time for Bishop is during the Messiah run, where he basically became a villain. You know, he basically became a villain, and he was chasing Cable, and he's trying to kill Hope, a little baby. I'm like, what the freak is this? Like, why is Bishop doing this? I hated that. I hated that so much. I've hated it so much. So when anybody asks me, what's your most hated time for Bishop, I always tell them during the Messiah arc, when he was chasing Cable around through time, and when Cable was raising little Hope. I hated that. Hope Summers, hated that. My favorite time, what I said, during District X, his days. But guys, how cool is that? How interesting is that to hear from one of Bishop's creators that his ethnicity was going to be changed? Now, how do you feel about that? Let's say, little word, if he stayed Filipino, if you are a fan of Bishop, would you have been cool with it? Would you still be a fan of him? Or would you have been like, nah, I don't like that. Nah, I wouldn't have cared too much. Personally, to me, I still would have been a Bishop fan, still to this day. He still would have been on my top 20 list of favorite mutants, X-Men. Cause yeah, he's on my top 20 list. So yeah. But outside of that, guys, I hope you guys enjoyed. I hope you enjoyed that little story that I got to tell. I haven't told that story in years, but I got to tell it. And I want to thank Miss Freeman. I know she passed away not too long ago. I remember getting her, my 10th grade English teacher, Miss Freeman. Loved her a lot, but I was always grateful for that, for letting me she compromised with me and I got to create that character. Now, in terms of that character, I have still kept him, and I have a writing book of where I kept all the cliff notes of what he was going to be like and everything like that. And I've been thinking about doing something with him again, but we'll see. But outside of that, guys, you guys take care, and I'll see you guys next time. This is the Opinion Spot, where your opinion matters, because I want to hear it. Again, what happens if Bishop stayed the ethnicity that he was going to be, that he was supposed to be at first? Would you still have respected it? You guys take care, and I'll see you guys next time. Deuces.